There's a drawer in our home that I almost never open. Not because I forget about it, but because I know exactly what's inside. Inside were stacks of letters, bills, and insurance papers that never seemed easy to understand. The numbers on those pages never felt small. Every time I looked at that drawer, it felt like staring at a chapter of our past that was still unfinished. It sat quietly there, waiting. But this was the part that confused me. While we were still making payments on that medical debt, we had also started putting money aside. My name is Clara, and that decision left me questioning myself for months. From the outside, the morning looked completely ordinary. Nothing seemed different as the day quietly began. I prepared breakfast while Mira got ready for school. Arman moved through his usual routine before heading to work. Everything followed the same familiar pattern as always. The morning unfolded without interruption. Yet beneath those routines, my mind kept calculating. The numbers stayed with me even while I moved through the day. I kept wondering how much of this month's bills remained. My thoughts quietly moved toward what would need to be paid next week. And I wondered whether there was still room to save even a little. It felt like a question I kept revisiting in my head. That question followed me wherever I went. It stayed quietly in the background of every part of my day. At first, I thought the answer was simple. It seemed like there was one clear thing we needed to do. If you have debt, then you pay it off first. That felt like the most obvious choice. Wasn't that what everyone said? I kept hearing the same idea in my mind. So for several months, that became our focus. We kept putting our attention toward making those payments. But whenever our savings balance got close to zero, I never felt completely at ease. Something about it kept sitting in the back of my mind. It wasn't because we weren't trying. We were doing what we believed we were supposed to do. The difficult part was knowing that one small, unexpected event could throw everything off again. That thought stayed with me more often than I wanted. One evening, while we were driving home, the car made an unfamiliar sound. It was enough to pull my attention away from everything else. The sound wasn't loud. It was only a small noise that most people might have ignored. Even so, I felt my heart tighten the moment I heard it. My thoughts moved faster than the sound itself. It wasn't the possibility of a repair that unsettled me. The noise itself wasn't what worried me most. What unsettled me was knowing how little room we had for surprises. There was no cushion waiting if something unexpected happened. If an unexpected expense arrived, we didn't have much distance between stability and difficulty. That thought stayed with me. I realized that one unexpected bill could send us back toward borrowing again. The possibility lingered quietly in the back of my mind. Mira still spent her afternoons playing and laughing like she always did. Watching her, nothing seemed different on the surface. Arman still made jokes over dinner and kept the conversation light. The evening sounded much like any other night. From the outside, our home looked perfectly fine. Nothing about it suggested the worries I carried quietly each day. Yet inside, I had started moving through each day on alert. It felt like part of my attention was always waiting for something unexpected. Whenever the phone rang, my mind immediately jumped to possibilities. Even before answering, I felt a quiet sense of concern. A simple envelope in the mailbox could make me tense up. Before opening it, I often wondered what news might be inside. Over time, I grew tired of carrying the feeling that one emergency could change everything. The thought stayed quietly with me, even on ordinary days. One afternoon, Mira tripped while playing in the yard. The moment lasted only a second before everything became quiet again. The scrape on her knee was tiny. It was the kind of thing that usually passed without much attention. A few minutes later, she was laughing and playing again. Nothing about her seemed bothered by the fall. Even after seeing that she was fine, I couldn't settle right away. My thoughts stayed somewhere else. My mind immediately jumped to hospitals, bills, and unexpected costs. The injury was small, but the numbers felt larger in my thoughts. In that moment, something painful became clear to me. The thought arrived quietly, but it stayed. I realized I was more afraid of a medical bill than the scrape on her knee. That thought sat heavily with me long after the afternoon ended. The house had grown quiet for the night. I sat alone in the living room, letting the silence settle around me. For the first time, I stopped avoiding the thought. I quietly admitted something I had been carrying for a long time. I realized the medical debt had never been only about numbers. It had become part of how we lived each day. More than the money itself, it had taken away a sense of security. That feeling had been harder to replace than I wanted to admit. As I sat there, another thought became clearer. Maybe that was why saving money mattered so much to me. It wasn't because I was trying to become wealthy. That was never the thought sitting with me that night. What I wanted was much simpler than that. I wanted to move through life feeling able to breathe a little easier. After Mira had fallen asleep, the house finally became quiet. I sat with Arman at the dining table, carrying thoughts I had been holding for a long time. I finally said what had been bothering me. I told him that every time we put money aside, I felt guilty. The reason felt simple to me. We were still carrying medical debt, and I could never completely ignore that. Arman did not answer right away. He sat quietly for a moment, thinking about my words. Then he admitted something unexpected. He said he often felt the same way. But another worry stayed with him. He was more afraid of facing tomorrow with nothing set aside if something suddenly happened. For the first time, it felt like we were looking at the same fear from the same place. We sat quietly, understanding what neither of us had fully said before. The following week, we made a simple decision. It wasn't a dramatic change, just a small adjustment to how we handled things. We continued paying the medical debt as planned. That responsibility was still part of our everyday life. At the same time, we began setting aside money for a small emergency fund. The amount was modest, but it had its own place in our budget. The balance wasn't large. Looking at it, I knew it would take time to grow. Sometimes it felt almost insignificant. The progress was so small that it could easily be overlooked. Yet each time the balance increased a little, I noticed it. Something inside me felt slightly different. It felt as if a small space to breathe was slowly returning. Not all at once, but little by little. I used to believe every financial decision had to be perfect. Any uncertainty felt like a sign that I was doing something wrong. Now I know life is not that simple. The choices in front of us rarely fit into neat boxes. Sometimes we have to repair the past while protecting the future at the same time. That reality became clearer to me over time. If this story feels familiar, I'm glad you're here at Clara's Family Journal. This is a space where even small progress still counts as progress. Now, I'd love to ask you something. If you've ever carried debt that made you feel stuck, what helped you find a little peace so you could keep moving forward?